Welcome, guys. Thank you for coming this afternoon and joining us for this presentation, this talk on diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging in creative organizations. We're going to be presenting for about 20 to 30 minutes this afternoon, and then we'll kind of toss it up to any questions and answer any questions that you guys might have. But just to give you a lowdown on who we are, I know some of you may know who I am. You may not know who I am. I am Dr. David Schreiber. I'm the chair of the Creative and Entertainment Industries program here in the White College of Entertainment and Music Business. I've been a faculty member here since about 2012, and I will be the first one to tell you that I am indeed not an expert on DEI, okay? But I am coming from a place where I'm learning. I'm trying to be a bit more proactive because I do understand its importance, its value, in not only all organizations, but specifically the creative economy and creative organizations. Because at the heart of what we do in the creative economy is creativity, and it's human creativity. And we cannot foster and bloom until we understand it and create inclusive environments for everybody in the companies in which we work for, or for you guys who are hoping to work for in the future. So that's a little bit about who I am, my background. We also have a co-presenter today joining me. Have her introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Nadine Warren-Perrero. I am an adjunct professor here. I see some very familiar faces, which is wonderful. I'm also the student enrichment coordinator at the Curve College, so I deal with everything. So you'll see me dealing with a lot of programming and things with our industry professionals, which is wonderful. And my background is I am not from here. I am from Malaysia, and I grew up there until I was 17, lived in Germany for about 3 years, and so I've immersed myself in different cultures. I speak 4 languages, and my goal here in helping Dr. Schreiber is kind of, to give a little bit of the global perspective of things, so I'm looking forward to doing that today.
Yes, she'll I'll introduce a little bit about what this structure is going to look like in the next few minutes, but she really is one that's going to be bringing some of these ideas and concepts to life, some of the case studies that she's written for this particular chapter in this presentation. So look forward to hearing a little bit more from you on that. I also want to extend a big thank you to Dr. Cheryl Carr for her support and the diversity committee of the College of Entertainment and Music Business, and the support they provided to help make this presentation and this paper a reality. And so the support from the Dean's office has been very welcome this past year for that. I also want to extend a thank you to Professor Sarah Weigel and Professor Jennifer Duck. They had an extensive hand in editing this particular paper and chapter and trying to help broaden the perspectives that I was able to bring writing it, but also to shed light on some implicit biases that might have come through because of who I am and my own lived experience. So they've been able to bring a wider perspective in that regard as well. So I want to extend a thank you to those guys. So just to kind of give you a little heads up on how this next few minutes or the next 30 to 40 minutes are going to go. We're presenting this isn't a primary research project that we did. This is basically a chapter that is going to be published in one of the textbooks that we use in the Creative Industries program. All the students will take a managing organizations class, and we've adopted a book that I've authored and had a co-author out of Australia. We've updated it with the second edition that includes, among many other important chapters like mental health and well-being, sexual misconduct in the workplace, but diversity, equity, and inclusion practices in creative organizations as well. And that's how we're going to present it to you today. There's going to be some sort of mundane definitions on how we operationalize. What does it really mean to be diverse as a diverse organization? What does it mean to be inclusive? So there's going to be some of those basic terminologies. We'll talk about marginalization and microaggressions and discrimination. And then we're going to lead you through, Nadine's going to bring that to life a little bit with her discussion about Disney and her case that she wrote for the chapter. And then we're going to show you some statistics of where we currently stand in the creative economy when it comes to women, underrepresented populations, people of color, and LGBTQIA plus individuals, as well as those with disabilities. So we're going to kind of see where we stand, where we currently are, and identify ways where we can do better in the creative world. Again, we're going to hand it back off to Nadine, and she's going to talk a little bit about how award ceremonies in the creative industries are trying to make progress and what their current practices were and over the years and their criticism that they've received about not representing the true population of artists and performers in the community. And then I think what is going to be the most important part of this entire presentation is really going to be the best practices. How do we do better? What is it that we can do in future creative organizations to implement better DEI initiatives? So that's how it's going to be structured, guys. We're somewhat entertaining. There's no videos or anything like that, but we are going to try to keep it as engaging as possible and keep this go through as quickly as possible. But before we dive into some of those definitions, I do want to give you a quick state of where we are in the creative world. Diversity is not represented very well at all, especially when it comes to the different levels of the industries. You can see with some of these statistics, if you look at the underrepresented groups in the US right now, about 40% of the US population is underrepresented population or groups of people. But when we look at the top executives, especially in music industry firms, and we can extrapolate this off into the film as well, only 13.9% are occupied at the top levels, what we call the C-suite. It's the presidents, it's the chairmen, it's the vice presidents, the top echelon decision makers in organizations certainly do not represent what the US population does when it comes to underrepresented people. And of those particular firms, these numbers are astonishing, right? There was a study that was done by the USC Institute on Inclusiveness, and they looked at 70 major and independent music companies around the country, and of all 10 underrepresented groups that were in these C-suite positions, major positions, all 10 of them ran their own company. That tells us that no one's hiring into those positions at the major companies, and that's a problem. It doesn't allow them to be the best versions of themselves as companies, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. So let's talk about what we mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity, we probably understand most commonly, we have to ask ourselves, is diversity more than just bringing people to the table? Different types of people from different ethnic and social backgrounds. When we talk about equity, is it more than an individual or group of people that are given the same resources or opportunities? And when we're talking about inclusion, is it more than practice or policy providing equal access? And what we argue, or what I'm arguing in this particular paper, in this chapter, is that it is. And it needs to be more. It needs to be more purposeful, it needs to be more intentional, and it needs to be more strategic in how we look at it. And when we first and take a look at diversity, it in of itself, to bring people from different social and ethnic backgrounds is important. It's an important initiative of it on its own, but it needs to be more than that, because it's a diverse set of people that leads to empowerment, to a point of being able to have input into decisions that are being made in these organizations, that they're able to do that they contribute to quality decisions, effective decisions, and being proactive in that. It's got to be more than just having people of different backgrounds and different social backgrounds or different lived experiences in there. They have to contribute to making better and more efficient decisions. When it comes to equity, I think most of us have seen this, or at some point, the difference between equality and equity. And in this chapter, as we try to define this for the students and explain this, we are wanting to emphasize that equity is not equality. And equality, by definition, is where each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. But what we need to emphasize and stress in this, that equity needs to go a little bit further. And that, the route to going or achieving equity is not accomplished by treating everybody equally, but giving the resources that they need to have that equitable position. And a great example would be if you hire someone who is visually impaired, giving them a small laptop to work on may not be effective to have them do their job effectively. Maybe they need to provide other sort of resources, bigger screens, different sorts of resources in order for them to do their job effectively. So stressing equity versus equality is a big part of what we discuss in this chapter. And then inclusion, right? Inclusion, in order to have an organization that has a purposeful strategy of an inclusion, we need to empower those people that are around the table. When we have a diverse set of people, allowing them to have a voice, to be action focused, and have it be not just someone at the top, but those employees in the organizations that are just onboarding, that may be coordinators, they may be managers, directors, independent contractors, knowing that you are empowered, that people will listen, is a part of this inclusion definition that we're trying to argue in this chapter. We then, once we operationalize those particular definitions, we go on to marginalization, we go on to microaggressions, and what we are utilizing or incorporating when it comes to discrimination and the laws that help to try to minimize that, as effective or ineffective as they may be. It is something that I feel our students and future managers and leaders need to be aware of. When it comes to marginalization, if you are not familiar with that particular definition, we try to define it as failing to create inclusive workplace. If you don't have an inclusive workplace, like we talked about empowering people, it can lead to marginalization. It puts people on the fringe, and it puts those people in power to lead to other types of practices like microaggressions. And when we talk about microaggressions, the put downs or actions, they often are linked to implicit biases that we bring into the workplace of our own lived experience. They can be verbal, they can be nonverbal, and it often alienates people, make them feel not empowered, but ashamed and often dehumanized. And as much as we try to mitigate these types of practices that are happening in organizations by passing non-discrimination laws and so forth, that still comes forth within the organization. And as leaders, as managers in creative firms, we need to do better at mitigating those types of circumstances by creating an organization that is inclusive, that empowers all employees. So I'm going to hand this now over to Nadine, and she's going to talk a little bit more specifically about how Disney has been able to operationalize some of this with their creative works, and how inclusiveness has led to more creativity and economic success for them. So,
thank you. Yes, so this case study essentially discusses how different films, different directors have gone into different environments and kind of adapted and immersed themselves within these different cultures in order to kind of get the depiction correct. So just a little bit of a view of where Disney stands. The Walt Disney Company is trumping all of these other companies here. And although they have a shorter output in the unit, they do make the most money, and they are ranking on the top right there. So you have the female lead or co-lead stat here. You see how much they make in there, and compared to all these different other companies as well. And then you also have the global revenue and dollar per film as well. So that's just a really cool snippet. The many awards and accolades that Disney has already collected include BAFTA Awards, the Golden Globes, Arts Directors Guild Awards, the Critics' Choice Awards, the Oscars, Annie Awards, as well as the Producers Guild Awards. And there's so many others as well. This is just a little brunt of it. And then we look at the consumer market here, right? And as you can see over there, the highest consumer market is the ages between 2 to 17. It comprises of 43% of the entire consumer market. And these, you can tell just from this view, the statistic, that it targets the global youth. So this is the youth in America as well as the youth globally. So it heavily relies on the audience's age 2 to 17. And these are very formative years, right? And so these youngsters are looking at the screen and wanting to see themselves reflected in it. So we covered the percentage, and then we talk about diversity in Disney films. So you have all of these different Disney films that represent different races. And as you can see, we've all grown up with these, and it's wonderful. Some deeper examples, the first one beginning with Moana. So in this case study, we talk about Moana. So the initial story about it is that there were two animation directors, John Musk and Ron Clement, and they wanted to create a Polynesian storyline with all these Polynesian characters. And so their chief animator, John Lasseter, responded with, go research. So what did they do? They went into this different country, they explored, right? So they traveled there, they learned from anthropologists, cultural practitioners, historians, linguists. So they went all the way to understanding the intonation of these languages and the people. Same thing with Encanto, which we listen to so much of Encanto's music in my house because of my child. But the directors Jared Bush and Byron Howard traveled to South America in the spring of 2018, and they did the same thing. What they had done was they immersed themselves within the culture, they conducted research, and they were inspired by all of these colors, right? From the cities of Pagoda and Cartagena, as well as the small villages and their people. A lot of their country's delicacies were also heavily influenced in the film. So we talked about the fat-bottomed ants, which they had emphasized as well. The fabric culture, textures, the architecture, the local languages, the pronunciation, which is similar to what they had done with Moana. And then the film cast, and this is fantastic because they were fully represented by Colombians. And then we have Soul. So Soul is very interesting because this movie came out in 2020, but all of the research and the pre-production that was done was initiated prior to the revival and the re-amplification of the Black Lives Movement in 2019. And so this was all of those tragic incidences with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Elijah McClain. So all of these were essentially, considered when it was broadcasted. And when it was broadcasted, it was essentially spurring up different conversations within the media, much needed discussions. And the cast was led by a team of Black Americans. And John Batiste, someone that you may, hear of, know of, he essentially produced a lot of the music within Soul. And then we look at a little bit of a graph here, and it shows that Disney is trying to do better. They are aiming to take responsibility and to continue amplifying underrepresented voices. They have created the Reimagine Tomorrow's initiative. And essentially, this is a portion in their website where they have individuals from all over the globe tell their stories and talk about these different perspectives. And that's a way that they're using to amplify voices. And in their social responsibility report that just came out, they have a 2% of growth in employees that identify as people of color. And so this makes up a total of 46%. And this is interesting, right? Because that is not a very high number if you look at it and think about the whole perspective of it, but they are really trying. And when you look at that graph, you can see that 4 of 10 of their directors are women, 3 of 10 directors are racially, ethnically diverse. I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Schreiber.
All right, thank you, Nadine. All right, so as Nadine just kind of outlined, I love Disney as a case. I think they are one of the most progressive organizations out there. They are one of the largest entertainment companies in the world. It's well recognized, and it does really illustrate how they are trying to do better as an organization and bring to life some of the inclusive practices that they are doing. And when you're talking about an inclusive environment and you're empowering your people, they go to great lengths to create the films, great films that are culturally representative, that leads to greater creativity, better films, all the things that we're really trying to achieve within creative organizations. So this next portion of the presentation that I wanted to walk you guys through is going to be a lot of statistics. So I won't bore you too much with them, but we'll go through some key highlights on these slides because you can read most of them on here, but I do want to point a few of them out. And when it comes to women, when it comes to people of color, and when it comes to LGBTQ individuals. So we're going to start off a little bit with some of the statistics that are coming out of that Annenberg Inclusion Initiative. If there is one particular, best word to say is it's a research institute that's coming out of the University of Southern California. They are doing a lot of wonderful work and conducting ongoing research. There's plenty of statistics, plenty of research being done in the creative economy right now when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives. But it's this institute that's going to be ongoing. You're going to see longevity from this institute, and you're going to see different trends, and they're going to be digging deeper and deeper every year into what they're uncovering about where we're at. So I think it's a good place to start for some of these statistics, and one that's going to be really valuable to the students as we introduce them into the future classes as they're reading this information. But when it comes to women in music, I think some of these statistics are not going to surprise any of you, right? I think one of the more alarming ones that we see here. If we take the general rule, I don't know what the exact percentages of women in the general U.S. population, probably 50 to 55%. Use that as a benchmark when it comes to how we're representing in this particular genre. So if you're looking at women in music and popular music at 23.3%, it hasn't really gone up or down too significantly over the past decade, and that's in and of itself is an important statistic. And the other one that I'd like to point out for those who are engineering and audio engineering producers that are female, 2.8% are producers in popular music. That is very significantly underrepresented. And when you look at the ratio of men to women producers across 700 popular songs, it's 35-1. So women aren't being represented appropriately in popular music, not only in front on stage as artists and songwriters, but behind the scenes positions as well that were underrepresented. When it comes to the award shows, I know Nadine's going to talk a little bit more about this later on in this presentation, but a couple statistics that I want to point out over here in the left-hand corner. When you look at the past decade, there was only, of all women, only 13.6% of Grammy nominees were women during that time in all categories. And that's really significant. And you look there, again, sort of indicative of the underrepresentation of producers, only 1.9 over the past decade, or for Producer of the Year. And you can see how they correlate with some of the other major categories within the music industry. When it comes to women in film, it doesn't really get any better. Honestly, the percentages are very similar. When it comes to speaking characters, this particular research that they've done, the study was looking at 1,300 films over, I think it was 2019. The study was done between 2007 and 2019. They haven't updated it yet, but you can probably guess if the trend is at all any similar, it's going to stay within the 30s. And again, if you're using that benchmark of 50 to 55% of the US population, they continue to be underrepresented and be portrayed in film. Other statistics in here, when it looks at behind the scenes, you can see when they did the study across 1,500 content creators, 12 women directors, you can see 6 women composers, 270 women producers, and 57 women writers. And when it comes to, this is an interesting statistic, and I would love to dig a little deeper in this one, but where they do dominate as a gender is casting directors. So when it comes to representation in film as casting directors, 71% are white women. So gender is being satisfied, but when it comes to underrepresented population of women, it's only 9.4%. Okay, that starts to give you a bit of a snapshot when it comes to the gender imbalance that's happening, at least in the music and the film industries today, and that continues. When it comes to people of color in music, women of color are invisible as producers. The study pointed out that 10 out of almost 1,567 producing credits went to women of color. So there's definitely not enough perspectives and different experiences and outlining are happening there. And of all the artists, 47.8% were people of color across 1,000 songs that were analyzed. So that's a little bit better. It's especially if we use, again, that benchmark of 40%. You always got to be a little bit careful what the statistics are measuring. These are small studies, but they are statistically significant, so they do have meaning. But what you really want to take a look at when you look at some of these things are the trends over time. Are things getting better? What are those numbers looking like? And then you can dig a little bit deeper into some of the studies to see what they're telling you. Some other statistics when it comes to people of color in film. Racial ethnic groups on screen in 2019. Percentage of underrepresented characters was only 34.3%. And of the films they looked at, 15 films had no Black or African American speaking characters. 44 films had no Hispanic or Latinx speaking characters, and 36 with no Asian. So I do want to break down some of those statistics a little bit more when we look at the Latino population. This is an interesting part of the study where they were able to identify that the prevalence of Latino leading actors vastly outstepped that of the US population. So if you look at what this study is really trying to tell us, 77% of, when you look at the 50 states and 2 territories that they studied, have a higher percentage of Latinos than Hollywood films do. So if you're looking at the percentage being represented is significantly lower. And there's some interesting sort of data that they were able to identify in the study. For Latinos on film, the overall, when you look at the percentage of the 1,300 films of this particular study they looked at, only 4.5% were Latino. And when you dig a little deeper up in here, of those that were co-leads, 49% were Latinas. And of course, the 2 lead roles were all played by Jennifer Lopez. So it is clearly a token situation that's happening within Latino representation in film production, especially when it comes to lead. There's a lot of work to be done there, a lot of representation, especially if you look at the population of Latinos and Latinx population in the US, it's definitely being underrepresented as well. When it comes to directors, again, behind the scenes type of jobs, only 4%, and 1 out of 1,335 directors were Latina. So again, lots of work to be done, lots of really alarming statistics. And when we look at Asian and Pacific Islanders, it fares a little bit better, but the numbers that stand out to me in particular is that this particular study needed to bring out women are sexualized on screen when it comes to Asian Pacific Islanders. So there's more sexualization even happening and gender stereotypes that are happening within these populations. So again, these numbers are alarming. In some cases, there's a lot of work to be done, both on screen and off the screen. And whether we identify a creative organization as one that is doing the business side of things or the creative side of things, is that this particular study needed to bring out women are sexualized on screen when it comes to Asian Pacific Islanders. So there's more sexualization even happening and gender stereotypes that are happening within these populations. So again, these numbers are alarming. In some cases, there's a lot of work to be done, both on screen and off the screen. And whether we identify a creative organization as one that is doing the business side of things or the creative side of things, they all play an important role when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. When we look at LGBTQIA+ in film, look at these numbers. They're quite low. Of the 26,600 speaking characters, 45 were gay. 10 were lesbian, 3 bisexual, and 3 is transgender. Clearly getting a little better, I guess, if you want to be positive in the gay category over the past 5 years. But when it comes to bisexual, it's not faring as well either. When it comes to persons with disabilities, only 2.3% of all speaking characters were depicted with having disability. So again, underrepresented even within the creative endeavors. These slides are available to you guys. I can make those available if you want some of these statistics, but I do really encourage all of you to look a little bit deeper. If you just Google the Annenberg Inclusive Initiative, you will find a plethora of studies that are being conducted with all of these statistics, all of the data, and more of the information behind how these studies were conducted available to you. So it's just a highlight as part of this chapter that has been written for students in the class. We will be highlighting some of these and dissecting and pulling apart a little bit more of them. So as we move on, I'm going to hand it back to Nadine. She's going to talk a little bit about how this misrepresentation is carrying over into our award ceremonies in the creative industries. And since we live and die and breathe by charts and awards, reputation and recognition in the creative economy, this is an important part that carries over into these ceremonies.
Yes, like Dr. Schreiber had mentioned, award ceremonies are so important, right, with representation, because it essentially tells you who is who, what is what, what's the film to watch, right? So this is just a little chart on where women lack representation in the Oscars. It's very interesting. So just take a look at this. So in 2022, this year, the Oscars saw only a total of 27% of women represented in the Oscars. This is the lowest rate that they've had in the past 3 years. So what do? The Oscars implements an academic inclusion standards form. This form essentially requires that you fill it out, and by the 96th Oscar ceremony, they would want to see that the storyline includes women, that the cast and the lead actors includes women, as well as people of diverse backgrounds, right? And the crew composition, so the people working behind the scenes and the people working as the producers of the work, also women. They want to see more inclusivity in that. For the Recording Academy in 2021, they became the first major award show to issue an inclusion rider addendum, which essentially is to support the DEI recruitment for the 2022 Grammy Awards. And this would include race, the LGBTQIA plus community, to support broadcasting. So this is whether or not it's on stage as well as off stage, which is very important. They also partnered with Women in the Mix, which eventually went out, surveyed these different colleges to find out how many women were in the industry, in the music industry, as well as their experiences as women in the music industry. And then they started the Black Music Collective. And this is an advisory group of music industry leaders. Fantastic. And they also partnered with Color of Change, which is the nation's largest online racial justice organization. So I prompt you to just go online and research them as well. It's a great website. The Golden Globes. So what did they do? They started reinforcing the subject of DEI by building partnerships with Leadership Lab International. They also provide their employees with a lot of DEI training, right? So you get into the company, how are you going to make it better? And how is your viewpoint going to, help with diversity? They also push to hire a diverse set of advisors. So that is also very important. So all of this to say that as we move forward and as diversity, equity, and inclusion is implemented into award ceremonies, it's going to be great for our future generation and for our future generations to be able to see what is on screen and see themselves represented and reflected as well. All right, giving it back to Dr. Schreiber.
Thank you, Nadine. So this is, again, the most important part, I think, of this entire presentation. With all the numbers, all the bars, all the graphs, and all the definitions that we tried to operationalize for you to see how we're going to be educating you guys in the future, it's what do we do moving forward? What are the best practices to create organizations in the creative industries to be better, right? And to be purposeful. And there's a couple of key things that I think, key action items that we can keep in mind. And this is going to be important for you guys. You are future leaders. You are future managers. You are future crew. And you will be in charge of making these policies, making these decisions happen. And understanding what makes a more inclusive organization that empowers your employees is going to be a key to making this better. So as part of this, first and foremost, it must be an integral part of your organization strategy. It's got to be purposeful. It can't be something that you tick a box on to move on saying we have DEI initiatives. It's got to be part of your mission. It's got to be part of your vision, and it's got to be part of your core values as an organization. And you must hold people accountable. It's one thing to say that, yes, this is important to us, but how are you keeping your key decision makers accountable? Your presidents, your vice presidents. If they say it's important, then you need to make sure that policies and procedures are in place to make sure that they continue to do that. Have it be a part of their performance reviews. Have independent parties or neutral parties review the processes and procedures that are in place in your organization. Especially when we can get sort of tunnel vision into how we do things. Maybe this is all we know how to do things. We bring our own implicit biases into the organization and the decisions that we make. And if we have a neutral party that doesn't have any sort of skin in the game, they can do a better job of pointing out where that organization is being deficient. Again, it's not just about hiring diverse employees. It's about empowering them, creating that inclusive environment, holding decision makers accountable, and then honoring the different practices of the people that you're bringing in there, recognizing different religions, different ceremonies, different dietary practices. If you're a place that provides, say, a benefit of free lunches or different types of snack bars, having different types available to all the people that work there as part of that culture can be subtle, little practical things that can go a long way in making your employees feel like they belong, that they are part of the culture that you are creating in that organization. It's also about a culture ad. I think you guys probably hear about culture all the time. What is organizational culture? Sometimes we say it's about how we do things around here. It's the stories, it's the rituals, it's the practices, how we do business. And then we all talk about when we onboard or bring new people into the organization, we talk about they got to be a cultural fit. Well, what does that mean exactly? fitting into how you're already doing things poorly. So it's really, there's some questions and things that really need to be answered about that. And you should focus more about the culture add. How can this new person add to what we're already doing? How can they make it better to what we're already doing? How can their lived experience, their background bring and make us better at making decisions, at being more creative, being more productive, all the things we're in business for in the first place. So thinking about more about culture add as opposed to culture fit, how we measure, right? Let's collect data. How many people are we, how's the review process going? Where are we improving? Put in metrics and benchmarks to improve what we're doing. How are people feeling? How can we solicit input and advice from our employees to make sure that this is a place they feel empowered, that they feel safe, that they feel like their voices are being heard and are leading to these decisions. Not just speaking for speaking sake, but actually taking into consideration so that these initiatives can happen. When it comes to LGBTQ rights and gender identity, embrace all gender identities, providing all gender bathrooms, any corporate communications referring to gender neutral pronouns in official documentation can go a long way. Providing and honoring different practices, nursing lounges, space for working moms. This was, I pulled this picture. If you are in a position where you are a nursing mother and you need some space to nurse or to do what you need to do, have it be comfortable, right? Not something that is 10,000 feet down on the other side or a different part of a building that's very inconvenient. It's embracing the different types of people that you have working in your organization. So I'm going to kind of wrap some of this up and talk a little bit about why or how it's important to put DEI in front in center in creative organizations. You want to make sure that people feel belonged. It's kind of some of the things that I've already said, making them feel included and that their opinions are respected, because you're going to get the best employees, you're going to get the best work when you actually embrace those kind of things. And these differences should be embraced. They shouldn't be excluded or marginalized. Seek regular feedback from your team on how you're doing if you happen to be leading or managing, and encourage internal and external networks. Give people safe places to be able to communicate in ways that things aren't going the way they say they should or what they're touting in certain areas, and have people have safe places, safe networks inside the organization and outside. But why? Why is all this important? And it comes down to, especially in our creative world, in the creative industries, because human creativity is at the essence of what we do. It's the products we sell, the services we offer, and the experiences that we provide for us to enjoy. That creative industry that we've created, this market, really is a commercial representation of that human creativity and the essence of who we are. So really paying homage to that, embracing it, is not only the moral and ethical right thing to do, but it's good for business too. It's good for creativity. It's good for what we're trying to achieve. So embracing diversity should be at the core of what we are as an economy, as a creative economy and a creative organization. And that, in a nutshell, guys, is really what we're going to try to be teaching you with this chapter, what we're going to be teaching in the classroom moving forward. This is something that will be published and available to even those outside of Belmont, if you so wish. But it is something that we're trying to push forward to and do better and be proactive in trying to educate you in the process. So I'm going to welcome Nadine back up here. And if you guys have any questions about what we discussed, this now is a great time to do it. Yeah.
I was just curious if there's any opportunity for student involvement.
Student involvement in?
Just like just the initiatives and things that you plan on doing. If there's anything that you need help with.
That is a great question. And I'm actually, if I could probably toss this one out to the audience that may be a little bit more versed in the particular opportunities in different organizations. There's probably some things on campus, but to your point, and I'm gonna look a little bit to Cheryl because she's in the room, and our student enrichment coordinator. I don't think we have a lot, but there's definitely opportunity for more, isn't there? So I'm gonna toss it to you, Nadine, because I think you can speak to that a little better.
Yeah, I think Dr. Schreiber had pointed Dr. Cheryl Carr because we do have a mentorship program for Black students. And this is fantastic because it connects people with industry folk as well as faculty who are Black faculty. So that's wonderful.
And we do have Women in Entertainment. We have a student organization there that you could be a part of. There is, am I forgetting? Women in Audio Engineering. There's another one, but there's clearly room for a lot more, right? Like I think there's a lot of opportunity to get involved. And I encourage you, if there's something that you're passionate about, when it comes to DEI and the creative economy of the music industry or film or, television, let's talk. Nadine's great student enrichment. Let's start an organization. Let's get involved.
Yes.
We have a new Women in Film student
Women in Film. Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
And there's a new student organization coming on board. Dr. Warren-Perrero is going to be leading
Latin.
with Latinx students in music.
And it's called Casa Curb. So that's fantastic too.
As I said in the beginning, I don't know everything. I'm certainly not an expert, and I've learned a lot already just on your question. So thank you. Any others? Yeah, Michael.
In the election textbook or the textbook that's coming out, it speaks about the percentage of people that aren't in a specific category or participating. Does it speak about the percentage of people that are trying to get in that specific category? So for instance, women, it's talk about the percentage of women producers that how much is lacking, but does it talk about how many women are trying to get into producing in general?
It does not. There was the practical implications were limits on the particular chapter. So there's certain things, there's a lot of things I had to leave out. When I started doing the research on it, there was so much really great information out there. So I had to, considering the audience, right? If we're talking undergraduate students who are wanting to work in the entertainment world, the creative industries world, I had to pick and choose what I included and what I didn't. So it didn't get too deep into that, no. But it certainly is something, as we go through those exercises in the classroom, we can dig deeper into some of those opportunities. Yeah.
So I know that it's not always about making sure that you hire specific people and picking people out, but how do you make sure when you're going through that hiring process that you do have a diverse selection of candidates?
That is a great question, right? And that is one, even in my role as a chair, and when we're trying to hire faculty that come from different backgrounds, it is really, really challenging. And I think it comes down to a couple of things. It's your network, right? It's always being proactive about where you're involved and making sure that you expand out from your comfort zone to be able to then seek out advice when you need to or try to broaden that pool. But it's definitely not an easy thing. I struggle with it constantly, especially here. Right now we have a particular position that's posted. We want a diverse set of candidates, and we have two. And one's a woman, one's a man, no one of color or of underrepresented, and we're going to struggle to find the appropriate candidates. But the best thing I can do is reach out to my network, to the people that can help influence and maybe bring in a broader pool for that. But it is definitely a challenge. But it also, if you become an organization that is purposeful in that strategy, it's an ongoing effort. It isn't something that just happens when you're hiring, right? It's an ongoing thing. It's something you can constantly review, get feedback from, and seek advice on how to do better. Any others? All right, there's no reason to keep you here till 1:50 for that. Then I just want to thank you so much for coming out, you guys, this hour. I know you have busy afternoons. It's midterms, you got exams, classes in between, getting away from work, and just taking a couple of minutes to kind of hear about what we have to say about this. We appreciate it. And again, thank you, Curb College and the Dean's Office for supporting this research. And if you have any other questions that you want to come talk to Nadine or I, we'd be happy to try to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I didn't